Welcome back to Extra Time, everybody. Act 2, break on through. Well, as Jim Morrison noted many years ago, we're all looking to break on through to the other side. And in this case, we're talking about the other side of the chalk line, which means getting off the bench and onto the field. So let's talk about a couple of players who have broken through this year. They were sort of reserves last year, and now they're starters and regular contributors. A couple names that come to mind right away, Shep. Dax McCarty in Dallas, Emmanuel Ekbo in Columbus.
Well, first of all, I thought you were going to sing that, so thanks for not
break
doing that.
Break on to the other side. We always have to sing on this show, right?
Dax McCarty. I mean, if you do a physical profile of a defensive midfielder, big, strong, sweeping in front of the back four, you're not going to find Dax McCarty.
I was going to say, where are you going with this one?
He's been brilliant, and that's why, because he's atypical for a defensive holding midfield player. But what he does so well, and he's gaining confidence, he wins the ball, and he does a smart thing with it. Doesn't lose it, sharp passing, knows how to distribute the ball. He keeps everybody in sync, and he's been brilliant.
A little bit like a Chris Armas. Remember, we think back to Chris Armas, same sort of build and vision.
Definitely like Chris Armas, but I would say a little less athletic than Chris Armas was. Okay. Chris very smart, and that's definitely Dax's forte, is his brains. Kind of like Richard Mulrooney is who I kind of compare him to. Very similar player, a player who was highly touted, taking number 6 in the draft. At the beginning of this season, though, the coaches had lost confidence in him. He was looking to be traded because he wasn't in the mix. But to his credit, he fought back, got back in the lineup, and he's producing for them.
Listen, he needs 10 pounds of muscle to look like Chris Armas, but I think his passing of the ball, his vision, his distribution has been tremendous.
Well, career highs in starts, minutes, and goals this year for Dax McCarty. Jason, what about some other players?
Well, you're mentioning Emmanuel Ekbo. I'll tell you, Emmanuel Ekbo, I think, is benefiting from Schelotto's injury, from the amount of games that Columbus has played, but he's showing that he deserves to be on the field. And you kind of saw that at times last year. He had flashes of brilliance, let's say, but inconsistent. And I would say right now, I still don't think he's a full-time starter for Columbus just because of the great players that they have, and he's kind of behind Rogers and Gavin. But he's shown when he gets out there, he can certainly contribute.
I think the experience of playing for Nigeria and going to the Beijing Olympics really helped him. I think he's grown in confidence.
He's got a great touch on the ball, that's for sure. Some other players that have grown this year, I think Stuart Holden coming in for Dero has done a great job down in Houston. Kosuke Kimura, actually, out in Colorado, has done really well. He's sort of penned in now at the right back position. Actually got a couple of goals this year.
Yeah, Colorado's really high on Kosuke Kimura, and he's deserved. He's really shown he has the quickness to defend on the outside. He also can get forward. He has speed. He puts in a decent cross. I think the thing with Kimura is his concept of the game and his essentially understanding has now caught up with the physical tools he had, and now he's contributing regularly.
Any other players that come to mind for you?
I definitely think you have to look at Marco Papa in Chicago, who wasn't really playing last year. They were sprinkling him in here and there. He's a regular. You expect him to start every game, although he's slowed down with his offensive production lately.
I'll give you 2 others. How about Riley? We talked to Seattle coach Siggy Schmidt about him. So-so for the New England Revolution, but Ziggy Schmidt very high on him. He's having a great season. Again, young player, confidence, knows how to play that outside back position. I'm going to throw in another one just so I get crazy email against this. How about Josh Wicks? I like him as a goalkeeper, cast off from the LA Galaxy, won the starting job for DC United. Had some temper tantrums, but I think he's nailed down a starting job.
Look, we talked about it a minute ago with Dax McCarty and fighting through the struggles. Well, you know what? Josh Wicks did it, and he deserves a lot of credit for that and securing a starting position. Well, we've also gotten a bunch of emails over the last couple of weeks, and we'll start with one that comes from Thomas in Seattle, who is, I like to think of him as a budding Jason the producer, if you will, because he emailed us with a statistic that we hadn't really noticed, which is that the Sounders are undefeated against the top 4 teams in the league, securing a 3-0-5 record against Houston, LA, Columbus, and Chicago. Discuss.
Well, Thomas, great email. And that one really caught me by surprise, too. But I like it. I mean, you have to be able to do 2 things. You have to beat the games, the teams that you're supposed to win against, and then you have to be able to beat the better teams. So Seattle's still finding their way. I think the best compliment to them is none of us really think about Seattle as an expansion team. They're a good team.
Yeah, and I think right now Seattle's a team that nobody wants to face in the playoffs. They have the veteran leadership on the field. They have a coach who's done it before. They have great goalkeeping in Casey Keller. And now you add into that the confidence that they've already beaten these teams, that they've played well against these teams.
And the crowd, the stadium, the fan base.
Exactly. Yeah. This statistic says everything you need to know about how they could do in the playoffs. I mean, Shep picked them very early on to go very far in the playoffs. We'll see if they can actually do it. We also got an email from Wilson, who calls himself an RSL supporter, and he is confused as when Jeff Cunningham was traded from Salt Lake, he was confused. He was one of those guys. But his question is this: why is Jeff Cunningham not being talked about as MVP of the league?
Wilson, I'm taking nothing away from Jeff Cunningham physically as a very talented player. He's having a wonderful year. There's a reason that Columbus got rid of him, Toronto got rid of him, Salt Lake got rid of him, Bob Bradley doesn't bring him into the national team. He has the reputation of being a lone wolf, not a team guy. Yes, I'll score my goals. Is he worthy of MVP consideration if they make it to the playoffs? Yes, but begrudgingly so.
I'll take that. If they make it to the playoffs, he is the MVP, but the reason that he wasn't in the discussion is because they weren't in the playoff mix. Right. And it's the same with Shaw Reed-Joseph. If New England makes the playoffs, Shaw Reed-Joseph is definitely a top contender, and if they don't...
I got one for you then. What if they both make the playoffs? Who wins MVP?
I think Jeff Cunningham, because he took Dallas from...
This is so different from last week. You were all about Shaw Reed-Joseph
all year.
Because you have to
Showery and 10 other players.
You have to understand that Dallas wasn't in the mix. This is the exact answer to his question. Dallas wasn't in the playoff mix. Now that they're in the playoff mix, if they get into the playoffs, they came from nowhere to be in the playoffs, and it was all on Jeff Cunningham.
No validity. Landon Donovan for me. He's the most valuable player in the league.
And probably the best player in the league. I don't know. I'm not going to cast my vote on either one of these right now. Some good questions this week. You can email us anytime at extratime@mlsnet.com. And also, don't forget about the Extra Time Guest Reporter Contest. You could win a trip to join us at the MLS Cup in Seattle. That's it for Wednesday, but on Thursday we're going to get down to brass tacks and talk about this unpredictable playoff race.